on your beautiful journals in front of you. Make room for your writing. By quick show of hands, how many of you write fiction? Yay! How many of you write nonfiction? How many of you like to try both, like me? Great. How many of you are like, I don't even know if I'm a writer? That's great. Yeah. You're in good company. You're in the right place. And we're going to talk about, before we dive into the kind of meat and potatoes of writing, I just want to bring to your attention an idea, this importance of making room for your writing. Before you actually show up, what you have to do to make this a part of your life. So quick little story. My name is Rachel Miller, and I'm still getting used to it because I got married just 1 month ago. Like 6 weeks. So this is my handsome husband. His name is Jeff. And I have found that it is true that opposites attract. At least that's the case with me and Jeff. He's very analytical. I tend to be imaginative. He's very left-brained. I tend to be squirrel-brained. He loves spreadsheets, and I love spontaneity. And we make an amazing team. He is so kind. He is so supportive. In fact, a couple of weeks before our wedding, we were in our townhome in Franklin. We're talking about what we wanted to do with the house and like furniture we wanted to buy and decorations. And he looked at me and he said the most romantic thing I've ever heard. He said, honey, we should turn that extra bedroom into a writing room for you. I know, right? That was my reaction. That's exactly how I was. I couldn't believe it. You know, I am the second oldest of 7 children. We grew up in an 1,800 square foot home, and we shared everything. We shared bedrooms, we shared beds, we shared clothes. On occasion, we shared toothbrushes. I had to go like hide in the laundry room to write or to read, like sit on top of the dryer and hope that no one found me. So the idea that I get an entire room, not just to live in, but to have a whole space for my creativity is just like blowing my mind. So I go crazy on Pinterest. I'm dreaming. It's gonna look like the library in Beauty and the Beast. It's gonna be beautiful. My friend Molly, who's in our writing group, sends us pictures of her writing space. Like, look how cute. Look, her golden doodle is in a teepee in the corner. Like, I don't know how she did it. So I'm like, this is gonna be great. I sit down in my room, I'm unpacking, I'm thinking, I'm like on Pinterest, and I just, you guys, by the end of my first day, this is what I accomplished. Like, spatial reasoning is really difficult for me, and like I said, I have a squirrel brain, so I just left feeling really discouraged. But then the thought occurred to me, you know, often when I sit down to write, this is an accurate picture of how I feel. I feel scattered. I feel cluttered. I'm distracted by the mess all around me. I'm pulled in like hundreds of directions by all the decisions I need to be making about that time or about my life. So like, this is actually the perfect beginning of my writing room. And for that reason, I want to spend a few minutes just talking to you all about the idea of making physical room for your writing. We're going to explore 3 different areas: making physical room for your writing, making mental room for your writing, and making spiritual room for your writing. Because I'm convinced that when you decide to show up and give writing the importance on your calendar, in your life that it deserves, you will be transformed. You will be changed. So let's talk about this idea, making physical room for your writing. You know, as writers, we're very cerebral. We like to live in our heads. We live in our hearts. We're chronic daydreamers. And we can forget about the importance of physically showing up for the act of writing. We can try to power through an environment that's distracting. The sights and the sounds and the smells and the ambiance isn't really what would best facilitate our writing. And I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Virginia Woolf very famously wrote, "A woman must have money and a room of one's own if she is to write fiction." To write anything, really. I learned of a cool example of this concept earlier this year. I read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. It was beautiful. And I learned that Maya Angelou would rent, when she reached some prominence in her writing career, she rented a hotel room by the month, and she would go there just to write. She would arrive early in the morning, she would leave around 2 o'clock, and that was her space. She was so particular about how she kept the room that she wouldn't allow the cleaning staff in there, afraid that they would like throw away some paper that had some brilliant line of poetry on it. So once a week, they would like beg her, please let us go clean, and she would let them. So I've been thinking about this idea because of my new opportunity to make a writing room, but it's made me realize about the importance of physically showing up for your writing and making the space beautiful and inspiring. And like, look around you. Like, I encourage you throughout the day, go explore the sanctuary. There's some little side rooms that are just beautiful that will help you really dig in and get some great writing done. And you have the freedom to do that. We're going to talk about that later, but you have the freedom at any point to get up and go write, because that's part of what today is about, is to actually get some work done. So, I want to be clear though, like, I'm not saying you actually have to have a physical room to write. And you also can't wait till Joanna Gaines shows up and waves her magic wand over your hot mess. Like, you have to sit down and just get it done. So maybe making physical room for your writing, maybe for you it looks like going to your favorite coffee shop every Saturday morning and claiming that back table by the window that you love. Or maybe it's going to your local library and getting one of those eerily quiet study rooms if that's what you need. And you also don't have to spend $7 on a latte every time you go write. Or maybe you're in a season of raising small kids and like everywhere you turn, it's like Cheerios and Legos. Like, go find your favorite chair, clean it off, put a cozy blanket on it, go to Anthro, get an overpriced candle, bring it back, light it when you write, and just claim it. Because when you claim something physical, it's a way to concretely say, this matters to me. It's a way to honor the demands of what writing takes from you. So, you sit down to write. You've got your cozy blanket, your candle from Anthro is burning, your kids are locked in the bonus room. And you open your laptop, and you open a blank Word document, and you get that little dopamine hit that every writer loves when you start something new. And then a couple of text messages ping onto your screen. And one of them is from your sister, and she's like, did you make the reservations for this weekend? And you're like, oh crap, I forgot to do that. So you hop online real quick and you make the reservations. So while you're there, like, what should I wear to that dinner? So you go to the Weather Channel to see what the weather's gonna be like. And then while you're there, you see this weird sidebar story about anacondas in the Amazon being buried under 8 feet of snow. And you're like, where does the Weather Channel get their stories? And why does it feel like the world is always ending when I'm on there? So you check the weather, and it's gonna be colder than you thought. So you're like, ooh, I should get that blazer that I've been looking at H&M. So you go to H&M's website, and you look it up, and they have it on your side. It's so cute, you can't wait. But you should probably check your clothing budget before you buy it. So you get your phone out, you open your budgeting app, but before you can get there, you see that this girl that you've been semi-crushing on Instagram, she's like a semi-influencer, you're like, she finally DM'd you back, and you have to answer right now. And that Word document is still blank on your laptop. Okay, tell me I'm not the only one who does this. You can show up and you can be ready to go. And then despite your best efforts, your own little brain derails what you're trying to do. So in addition to making physical room for your writing, we have to commit to making mental room for our writing. Because our lives can be cluttered, but more often than not, I find that my brain is just as cluttered. I think that this is the biggest distraction for us in our current world, to really do the hard work to do what we need to do to channel our attention and our focus, because writing is hard, y'all. Getting into a place of deep work and of flow and of like, it's kind of like sometimes it doesn't feel like it's even happening until about 30 minutes in. I'm like, oh yes, here we go. All right, now the ideas are flowing. And this is really tough. This is a very intentional choice and discipline that we have to make. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is clearing the clutter, like getting your brain freed up from all the distractions and the worries and the to-dos that are going on in your life. And here are a few practical tips that I found in my life. So I'm going to talk about two different books real quick. One is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Has anybody gone through this? This is probably the best investment I've made in myself as a writer. Like in terms of a book, a journal, course, I highly recommend it. One of the things that she has you develop, a habit that she has you develop, is called the morning pages. At some point early in your day, you wake up and you just free-form write by hand 3 pages or so of your journal. Just all the thoughts, that weird dream you had last night. Why did he look at me that way yesterday? Just all the clutter, all the to-dos, you get it all out, and it's like a mental juice cleanse. It just gets you clear and gets you ready to work. The second thing, the second book I want to recommend to you is Deep Work by Cal Newport. Also one of the most important books I've read for myself as a writer, talking about a bunch of practical ways to get into flow, to really destroy the distractions, and so I have it up here. He's excellent at talking about how costly it is when we context switch from one thing to the next. You know, I read a study recently, I read it down here, that The average iPhone user touches their phone 2,617 times a day. And this study was actually a couple years old, so it might be higher than that. Over 76 sessions on your phone. So let's say that you're asleep for 8 hours a day. That's 5 times an hour you're going to your phone and doing something. And for millennials, that number is actually much higher. That's just like the average, right? So you have to be ruthless in like directing your attention where it needs to go. Your attention, your ability to focus is like the greatest tool you have as a writer. I heard a podcast recently that said that writing is just the art of explaining things. And you have to be able to focus, to really go deep, to block out distractions. So I know myself, and here are some of the rules I've made for my little squirrel brain when I sit down to write. I like to have a clear goal. I want to do 500 words on this topic, or I want to do all the revisions on this article. So I know when I'm finished, and I can stay focused on that thing until it's done. I set a timer. I like to work in hour or 90-minute blocks. I go into the office every day for my job, and when I'm working on some writing there, I book a conference room. I get alone. I'm in there for an hour or 90 minutes until I know I can knock out the thing I'm working on. I turn off all notifications, put my phone in a drawer, and unless I need it for research, I often disconnect from the internet so I'm not tempted. It's just one more hurdle I have to get over before I go do something online. And I impose deadlines for myself. For this talk, I did about 4 run-throughs with some very generous friends and my mom. You know, whenever I'm working on something, I'm like, I just need to hear my mom tell me how awesome I am. So I like did a run-through with her. She was very sweet. Love you, Mom. And I like to give myself a little treat. Like I like to plan something fun at the end of this session. Like I'll go on a walk with my husband, or maybe I'll go buy that blazer from H&M, right? Save it until after your writing session. So just know yourself and develop these little disciplines that work for you in your writing. Okay, but we have another problem. Because you can be really good about not letting distractions derail you, but I find that when I sit down to write, all of my insecurities, they call a meeting, and they're like, now's a great time to talk to Rachel. And they show up, and they just start saying really mean things. So in addition to clearing the clutter, you have to silence the cynics in your head, like these voices of fear and doubt that whisper or sometimes yell that you don't have what it takes. It's different for all of us, but here are a few that I hear. Rachel, you never finish what you start. You know how many ideas you have in like a graveyard of Word documents? You'll never be as good as fill in the blank. Who do you think you are to talk about this subject? You don't have the guts, the skills, the creativity to make it as a writer. So I don't know what it is for you. Maybe you feel like you're not educated enough. Maybe you feel like you're too old. I love this story. If you think you're too old, this is really fun. So you've probably heard of the book Don Quixote. It's like one of the most important works of literature in all of time, especially in the Western canon. The author, Miguel de Cervantes, he really struggled throughout his life. I mean, he went years and years where he wasn't really doing much, especially getting published. It wasn't until he was 58 years old that the first volume of Don Quixote came out. And translating that to life expectancy kind of today, that's like your grandpa becoming a best-selling author, okay? Like, it's not too late. You're not too old. So I like to have a little fun with my cynics. I think of this little guy as like a lazy sloth in my head. And I know it's a bit of a hot take. For some reason, people just love sloths these days. But I'm an Enneagram 9, and the sloth is kind of my anti-spirit animal. Like, because part of me is always trying to convince me to just take a nap, because that's easier. And so I like to think of this sloth as like, no, you don't get a voice, you don't get a vote, because guess what? I went to Costa Rica with my husband on our honeymoon. We learned that sloths sleep 20 hours a day. They only come down one time a week to use the bathroom. They can't even do it more than once a week. And they're also, this is really going to destroy your love of sloths. I'm sorry, but also not sorry, because if you ever hug one, you need to know that they are tick infested. They have all of these parasites that live on them. So in my mind, I'm like, this little creature, this part of me that's trying to derail my creative efforts, I just dismiss it. I'm like, you're a lazy, good-for-nothing bag of bones. You get out of here, sloth. So I don't know if that trick would work for you or not, but do something to engage these cynics. And then guess what? You're a writer. You get to decide the story. You get to decide what you say back. And just know that you're not alone. We all experience these kinds of doubts. So the last thing I want to talk to you about In addition to making physical room, mental room, is to make spiritual room for your writing. I'm a follower of Jesus, and I know that many of you in this room are, but if you're not, just like hang with me. I think you're still going to be able to connect with something that I have to say here. Because the reality is, we're here because we love to make things. We love to make beautiful things. We love to see people impacted by our words, to be captivated by the beauty, to be transformed, to be changed. And you're made that way for a reason. Because truly, your writing is not about you. Your writing is about the person who needs to read it. I find that when I'm able to reconnect with the purpose behind my writing, I enjoy it more. I'm motivated to stay connected and to stay diligent in the long haul. Because you have something inside of you that's going to spark healing in a bitter and broken marriage. Or you have a novel inside of you that's going to captivate the imagination of the 12th grade English class. It's going to teach them about life and about the hardships of life and prepare them to live life well. But if you don't make room for it, if you don't do the hard work of bringing it into the world, then it's going to die inside of you. So I love reading the Bible, and one of my favorite books is the book of John. The author, John, is talking about the life of Jesus. It's a biography about Jesus. And he opens it this way. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God." And obviously, as a writer, I'm like, that's very cool. Like this word. That's how interesting that John would use that to describe Jesus, God made flesh. And so I looked this up in the Greek, and I thought I'd show you the Greek so you think I'm really smart. I really actually don't. I think that's it. No, logos is this word in the Greek. And I'm always fascinated by how translators convey the complexity of a word and translate it multiple ways in a specific document. So logos, throughout the New Testament, is translated in a variety of ways. Word shows up as statement, communication, story, message, tidings, news, preaching, speech, and talk. God is a storyteller, and he came to connect with us through story. Jesus used story to teach people. He rarely taught without using some concrete example from life. Later in John it says, "You did not choose me." Jesus is talking to his followers here. He says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last." I love this as it relates to our writing, because it's cool. Like, our writing's going to outlive us. I don't know if you ever thought about that. We have the opportunity to impact people here and now, but like maybe people we will never even meet are going to read what we have to say and be blessed by it. So this idea of making spiritual room for your writing is about connecting it to the thing that's bigger than you. It's reminding yourself that your gift as a writer is about serving other people. So a couple quick tips for this is like pray. Like invite God into your writing sessions. I heard a quote from John Piper, who's a preacher and a theologian who had a big impact on my life. He says that 5 minutes of prayer can save him 5 hours of preparation, because he gets connected, he's in tune with God and where he's leading him. And like I said, if you don't believe in God or that, this is about connecting to the bigger purpose beyond your writing. Like know with intentionality what your writing does for those around you. Another thing is to share. Like some of you have some really good things to say and you're scared. And I get that. I've been there. We all have. But once again, this thing about spiritual room for your writing is to recognize that this is bigger than you. Like who needs to read what you have to say? And one quick word before I wrap up this section, like trust how God has wired you. I think a lot of us in this room second guess the things that we're curious about and the things that we want to make or bring into the world. Like some of you Christian writers in here, if you are a believer and you just want to write like novels, you think like somehow that's like not as holy as writing devotional books. Like, well, if I really love God, I'd be writing devotional books, right? Well, why wouldn't you want to write the best novel you could and bring honor to God in the marketplace and reach people? Chow and I were talking about that this morning, like to reach people who you otherwise would never reach by writing the best fiction you can. And some of you who do write devotional content or spiritual living, you're like, oh, well, I mean, I don't have it figured out, or I don't know Greek, like I know as much Greek as Rachel does. And so you're struggling with a sense of guilt about your qualifications. Like, man, like, have you read the Bible? Do you know the kinds of people God uses to do great things in the world? Like, just allow him to use you, and in your weakness, you'll become strong. So I'm going to close today, or not today, this little talk, by sharing a quick story about how making room for your writing can have a big impact. Because you might be in a season of life where, like, I don't have 2 hours on a Saturday. What are you talking about? Even just a little bit of room for your writing can do great things. So I was raised in a very conservative homeschool environment, and to me, the idea of a good time was reading dead theologians like Jonathan Edwards. Like, his greatest hit was Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, so that's what we're dealing with here. Yeah, and just a couple other things about him. He was a Puritan, preacher, and theologian, philosopher, very, very important thinker in the early days of the United States. He lived in the first half of the 18th century. And fun fact for all my Hamilton friends out there, he's the grandfather of Aaron Burr. So, we have him to thank for that drama. So, Jonathan Edwards, when he was turning 18, he wrote for himself a set of resolutions, 65 resolutions. They're like little personal growth goals that he had. And I read about these things when I was 16, about to turn 17, and I was so inspired. I thought, I'll make some resolutions. And I did not make 65, I made 3, so, baby steps. One of them was that every day, except for Sundays, I was going to write a letter by hand, a letter of thanks or encouragement to somebody in my life. And I was going to drop it in the mail or give it to them that day. And you guys, I wish that 31-year-old Rachel could go back to 17-year-old Rachel and ask her how she did it, because I did it. Like, for not only 1 year, but for 2 years. I wrote 6 letters a week. And I don't say that to be like, ooh, look at me, because I promise for like every one writing challenge I've completed, there are 99 where I have failed. And so, but I thought about this, I was like, I wonder what kind of overall, like, cumulative impact that choice to make room for my writing had. So I totaled it up. I estimated it probably took me 20 minutes a day to sit down and do this. So over the course of 2 years, that adds up to 5.2 40-hour work weeks. Like, wouldn't you love to take on 5 weeks to go work on your book? I estimated I wrote about 150 words per day. Sometimes they were pretty long, sometimes short, but that's what I went with. Y'all, that's just shy of 94,000 words. Like, that's that novel that I've been wanting to write. I estimated that I spent about $175 on postage. So, like, most of you out there, you're like, am I ever going to make money as a writer? Like, somehow I'm paying to do this. That's how I was. So, in total, that came out to be 626 letters from just a little bit of room. And y'all, we live in a time where we're so obsessed with numbers and metrics, like how many followers do you have? How many sessions are you getting on your website? What's your click-through rate? How many subscribers? How many books have you sold? And we can so quickly forget that wasn't just 626 things I produced. That was 626 moments of connection with someone I cared about. It was 626 moments of relationship and of hope and of peace and of encouragement. Me looking at someone and say, hey, you did a really good job last week on that project. I saw that. Or, hey, I hope you feel better soon. I know you're going through a hard time. Y'all, when you choose to make room for your writing, you will be transformed, and you will be able to lead others into moments of transformation. And I know that's what all of us in this room really long to do, is to make a contribution to the world through our giftings. So, we're going to go now into a time of discussion. You've got some discussion questions on your table. I think there's 2 copies on each table, so if someone could pick that up and just kind of lead off. You've got 2 questions for each of these areas. Physical room, mental room, and spiritual room. So we're going to take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and just connect on those questions.
Good morning. How